Millstone is a 2-mana artifact that you can pay 2 mana to activate. When you do, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. Couple of funny things about the Antiquities printing here. Firstly, the mono artifact type line is kind of an artifact itself, from a bygone age when there were 3 different types of artifacts. Mono meant that you had to tap it to use it, but for some reason they didn't see fit to just put the tap symbol in the text. The other thing that I like about it is that it says to take the cards from target player's library and put them into target player's graveyard. Nowadays, wording like that would suggest that you have to target 2 different players, which is getting into some unset territory. Always make sure to separate your graveyards at the end of each game. Both of these quirks have been cleaned up over the years, with the newest version of Millstone printed in Core Set 2019 and reprinted in Mystery Booster. This card is so enduring that the action it represents has, since pretty much forever, been called milling. The action proved popular as it allowed a new strategy that caused players to lose the game as soon as they ran out of cards. While mill has never been a dominant strategy, it's popular with newer players and has offered plenty of opportunities for jank over the years. Even now, in the MTG Arena days, thousands of players around the world are looking puzzled at their screens and saying, "Are they playing a mill deck?" But throughout all that, the word itself was never made official. Until now. Core 2021 is the first set to actually use the keyword action mill. As is the policy for changes like this, all past cards have also been updated to say mill, provided that they perform this exact function. But after years of debate over which word to use, why decide now? And what does it matter what the card says if nothing's actually changed? This isn't a substance situation, nothing was broken, so why go back and affect 262 old cards? The answer has to do with teachability. Magic isn't that easy to learn, and the people who write the text on cards have to think a lot about that. In theory, any card could be the first card that a new player picks up, so they need to consider what that person will understand when they read it. Reminder text might seem pointless or even annoying to you, but it's a crucial tool for explaining these mechanics. But especially on cards with a lot of words already, reminder text can actually make a card harder to read. For this reason, a lot of modern rares and mythics will leave off reminder text. This is seen as a fair trade-off because, statistically, a brand new player is less likely to pick up a rare than a common. On the other side of the spectrum, you have cards designed specifically for new players, such as the commons of a core set, which will go out of their way to explain every aspect of their rules. So, if we get back to the issue of mill, you'd be forgiven for thinking that this is actually easier to learn than this. After all, one actually explains what you're doing, while the other relies on you to already understand this word, and even in a situation where you have reminder text, the card is just as long, or even slightly longer. Well, you are right, but there are some fundamental advantages to this change that aren't immediately obvious. The new version of these cards save reading time for anyone who already knows the word. Now, it's true that Magic needs to appeal to new players to keep growing as a game, but on the other hand, the vast majority of people who look at Crow of Dark Tidings already know what mill does. That's because the community adopted the term very early on, and it became so widespread, and the mechanic was used so often, that it was effectively an unwritten keyword. Speaking personally, I know that when I play a mill card, and an opponent asks what it does, I will always say, mill you for 2. Now the card says the same thing. That's good, that's a case of design working to fit the needs of the user. But there is still the newcomer to think about. And yeah, they're now going to have to learn a keyword that they didn't have to learn before in order to fully understand the game. This can be a negative, because even with reminder text, a game with too many keywords can be frustrating and inaccessible. I have friends who won't play Seven Wonders or Race for the Galaxy because they don't want to have to decipher cards like this. The end goal with this kind of symbol language is to make understanding as efficient as possible. But broadly speaking, efficiency is not the goal. The goal is comprehension. We don't want our Magic cards to have as few words as possible on them. We want to be able to understand them as quickly as possible. But even with that caveat, milling provides a slight increase in the difficulty of the average player's learning experience. But I would argue that it's worth it for what you get in return. Think back to when you first learned Magic. You probably went through a process a bit like this. You were taught by a friend, you played your first games, you bought a deck, bought some boosters, and eventually went online to find out more. If you learned from Arena, then you probably followed a similar path, but you might even have gone online very early. You can think of these stages as obstacles in the way of you becoming fully engaged with Magic, becoming what Wizards calls a superfan. They're not obstacles in the sense that they're unpleasant to go through, but from the company's perspective, each of them has a certain probability of turning you away from the game. Maybe you couldn't afford that deck, or you didn't like the colours, it could really be anything. In the case of the going online stage, this broadly just means interacting with the wider community. It could also be called the first F&M stage or the pre-release stage. Whatever it might be, one aspect of this obstacle is learning the slang. Magic has all kinds of rituals, in-jokes and jargon that, in their own way, make it harder to learn the game. This scene from Friday Nights describes it perfectly.
My strategy for sealed is just try to be a total sack.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, then all you have to do is rip gas.
Whoa, that's rude.
They mean peel bombs, dude. Is that safe?
So here's the beauty of finally keywording mill, and not going with some unintuitive, technically more flavourful word like forget. Yes, it increases the difficulty at one stage, but it actually decreases it in another. A newbie no longer has to ask what mill means, because they've already read it on a card. As a consequence, they're less likely to lose step with their more experienced opponents at their first F&M, and heaven forbid they're the socially awkward type, they no longer have to feel stupid because they don't understand. Someday soon will come full circle when Millstone gets a reprint, and the card that inspired this keyword will finally have been written exactly as players have been saying it for years. Mill you for two?